Hello again, YouTube. It's Skylar. Welcome back to my home. And in today's topic, I'm going to be discussing changing your name. Now, for most transgender people, as far as myself included, changing your name is one of probably the most important things that you can do during your transition. And I know for me, it was the most important as far as getting all the legal stuff out of the way. So, what I'd like to start off with is making sure that you know what name you want because it's going to be with you for the rest of your life. So make sure that you become acclimated to having people calling you that name and referring to you that name long before you decide to have it changed legally. And in doing so, you're going to make sure that that's the best name for you, that's the best fit. Now, for me personally, I picked the name Skylar long before I even transitioned. I probably picked the name out for myself like almost a decade ago. So it was very easy for me to know what name that I was going to transition into. But I still played around with a few different ones, and I ultimately did decide that Skylar was the best. If your birth parents are still alive, the ones that named you, it's not unreasonable to have a discussion with them as to what the names that they might have decided if you had been born female. But again, that's entirely your preference. The only person that should be making the determination as to what name you should be picking is yourself. And I know it's very easy to get caught up in, getting advice from people about certain names, but it ultimately rests with you because at the end of the day, you're going to have to live with your new name, not other people. So you want to make sure that it's something that you 100% feel comfortable being called and referring to yourself as. Now, getting the name legally changed after you've already decided out which name you're going to pick, that depends entirely on which state you live in. And it can either be, as many people who have been divorced or gotten married have figured out, it can be either a fairly simple process or it can be extremely long, drawn out legal process. So in my state, it was more towards the drawn out phase. I had to get a legal petition from the courthouse, which was about, I want to say, almost $600. And from there, I had to get that certified as an authorization by the editorial service of the county. And the publication for that, I think, cost another $300 or $400. And that had to be in publication for, I think, 2 months before I could have the authorization sent back to the courts to be signed off by the judge. Now, that sounds like a lot, but that actually is the normal standard sort of for having your name legally changed. Also having to have that same petition sent over to the Social Security Administration, as well as getting an amendment to your birth certificate, and then the arduous process, which is the hardest of all, which is then having to go back and update every contact information from every source that has ever known your name ever, which sometimes is more easily said than done. Other times they need 2 written authorizations and a photocopy of your ID, which you get after you go through that whole process. You can take all that information down to the DMV, and then they'll go ahead and submit it for review, which usually takes about 20 to 30 minutes while you're waiting there because the DMV isn't slow enough as it is. And from there, they'll issue your new real ID, and that'll have your new legal name on it. Ironically, changing my gender legally was way more simple. All I had to do was have a authorization letter signed off and certified by a licensed physician who makes the determination that you are in fact identifying as the gender you are trying to becoming, living full time as that gender, and taking the steps necessary to medically transition to that gender. So you take that letter of authorization, which in my state was fairly easy, to the DMV, and then they process that just the same way. I do know in some other states it can be a lot more drawn out, but in my situation it wasn't. So thankfully that wasn't too much of an uphill legal battle. But aside from all that, the I think it's the easiest part of your transition, because it's all bureaucracy. It's all red tape. It's really dense, and it's really annoying, and it takes a lot of time, and it does cost a considerable amount of money. But it is a process. It's a standardized process that has all the implementation to go about getting the result that you want. And it's very systematic, and it's very processed, and you get it done, within a not an unreasonable amount of time. So in a lot of respects, I would consider the legal processes of changing your gender marker and your legal name probably to be one of the more easy parts of your transition, just because there's a lot less social stigma attached to it, because it's going through the actual government and not social people or friends or family. Now, keep in mind, most everyone that has known you by a certain name for a long time is going to make the mistake of misidentifying you with the name that you had before, just because they're so used to using that name. So you're going to have to give them time to sort of relearn this new identity, and it's going to be a process just like everything else, so you just have to give it time. As far as all of that is concerned, my personal recommendation when choosing a name, and this is just my personal opinion, is when you're trying to transition, you're trying to blend in as much with normal society as possible. And in doing so, the easiest way to go about changing your name is, obviously you want to pick something that you like, but you want to pick something that's not too exotic or out there. I would recommend not using customized names that no one goes by, if you understand what I mean. You can. I would recommend against using something with too many syllables in it, just because you run the risk of it just being shortened to something you may not like. Obviously, Skylar can be shortened to Sky, and I have no issues with that. I call myself that occasionally too. But just be aware that if your name has 7, 8, 9 syllables, it's going to be abbreviated by people. So keep that in mind. Also, spelling is a really important factor, because whether you're cisgender or transgender, it's no fun having people constantly misspell your name or having to ask you how to spell your name. It does get annoying in the long run, and since you are choosing your name, you're getting to decide how to spell it too. So keep in mind, the more difficult you make it to spell, the harder you make it to pronounce. That's just going to translate in down the road. Every time someone needs to spell your name, they're going to have to ask you, and it's going to be annoying. So just keep that in mind too. Other than that, it all comes down to personal preference, really. I chose the name Skylar. It's an old-fashioned name. It's Dutch for scholar. and I felt like that was the most appropriate pick for me because I've always felt that education is the most important thing and that knowledge is power. And it was the best fit for me. I didn't listen to what other people wanted. I listened to my own inner voice, and my own inner voice told me that this was the name that was most correct for me. So, with that said, I hope you have a not completely disastrous time getting your name legally changed, because it can be an uphill battle process sometimes. Um, Take it with a grain of salt. Have a little fun with it when you're picking your name. It's not supposed to be some gray bureaucratic process. It should feel exciting. You're picking a name. Not many people get to do that. They have the opportunity to change their name. So have a little fun with it. Do your research, look up some different things, see how they sounded, have fun with it. So with that said, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. That's what keeps it going. And I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow in my next video. Have a good rest of your day, and bye.